The hull hit the pier hard enough to throw me into the console, a sound like the whole world tearing, steel folding against concrete. And when it stopped, the bridge went dead silent. And in that silence, every eye on that bridge turned and found me. I was the officer of the watch, standing at the engine controls, and a 10,000-ton ship had just put her bow into the berth, and every face in that wheelhouse had already decided the answer before anyone said a word. The officer at the controls did it. My hands were on the telegraph, so it was my hands that hit the pier. I'd been at sea 18 years. 18 years, and I had never so much as scraped a fender. I was the officer masters asked for on the hard arrivals, the tight harbors, the night approaches, because I was careful, and I called the ship exactly the way she needed to be called, and I did not let anybody rush me off of good seamanship. Careful. That was the whole thing I sold. Careful was the only thing I ever sold. And in the time it takes a bow to find a pier, I was the officer who wrecked a ship. I want to tell you about the man who put me there. His name was Vance, and he was the pilot conning us in, with the master standing right beside him. A pilot takes the con in tight water. He knows the harbor, and you give him the ship, and the officer of the watch works the orders, the helm, the engines, exactly as they're called. It's a chain you trust with the whole ship, because in close water there's no other way to do it. And that evening Vance wanted the berth before the tide turned, and he brought us in too fast. Well over the speed the passage plan called for. And I called it. I said we were coming in too fast for the approach. And when we needed to take the way off her, I called for slow astern, and then I called for more, because the ship wasn't answering the way she had to. And Vance countermanded me. He held the engines. He overrode my orders. He kept her driving toward that berth on the speed he wanted, betting the ship would check up in time. She didn't check up in time. 10,000 tons carries its own mind when you bring it in too fast, and the bow went into the pier, and it became a marine casualty with the company's name and the flag state's name all over it. And the second it went bad, Vance's story was already made. He didn't tell them he'd conned her in too fast and countermanded the watch officer. He told the company, and then he told the investigators, that the officer on watch mishandled the engines and the helm. He pointed at the controls. At me. Here is what that costs an officer like me. It is not just the job. That certificate of competency, the license that lets me stand a watch at all, a finding that I mishandled the ship and caused an allision puts that certificate in front of a board that can suspend it or take it for good. And when your ticket is gone, you do not sail as an officer for anybody, on any flag, again. 18 years, and the sea is the only trade I have. And a casualty with any injury at all is how an officer ends up answering to more than an inquiry. I sat in my cabin that night, a 44-year-old woman who'd been told she might never stand a watch again, for orders I had argued against out loud on that bridge. I have a family ashore that I keep from the sea. I told my husband on the sat phone that something bad happened, and someone was saying it was my fault, and that I was going to prove whose voice actually ordered that speed. I said it out loud, so I'd have to go do it. The helmsman had heard the whole thing. He'd heard me call slow astern and heard Vance override it. But he was an AB, an able seaman, junior and frightened, and crossing a pilot and a master is how a young sailor ends up beached with no berth, and I wasn't going to hang a scared man's word against two senior mariners as my whole defense. This wasn't going to get fixed by whose word carried more gold on the sleeve. It was going to get fixed by the one thing on that bridge that records every order out loud and doesn't care who outranks whom. Because here is what Vance forgot, the way these people always forget the one thing. Every ship like ours carries a Voyage Data Recorder. A VDR. The maritime black box. It logs our speed, our heading, every helm order and every engine order and how the ship answered, the radar, the position, all of it, stamped to the second. And it does something the others don't quite do. It records the bridge audio. Every word spoken in that wheelhouse. Every order, out loud, in the voice that gave it. The recorder does not care about the tide, and it does not care that Vance is the pilot. It just keeps what happened and whose voice did it. So through the marine casualty investigation, and with my union pushing, they pulled the VDR and read it out. The data track. The bridge audio. And they put them on one timeline, the last few minutes of that approach, side by side. The data showed the approach speed well over the plan, exactly as I'd called. The engine record showed the correct orders, the slow astern, the astern movements to take the way off, being given and then overridden. And the bridge audio, the part one will be grateful for as long as I live, had all of it in the actual voices. It had me calling that we were too fast. It had me calling slow astern. It had me calling for more astern. And it had Vance, clear as the bell on the telegraph, countermanding me and holding her on toward the berth. The recorder had stood that watch right alongside me. And the recorder said the watch officer called to take the way off, and the pilot ordered the speed that put her into the pier. They held the casualty inquiry in a hearing room ashore. The company's designated person was there. The investigator from the authority was there. Vance was there, in a good jacket, still sure that a pilot's word and a master's beat a second officer's, the way they usually do. My rep put the VDR track and the bridge audio up together, and we didn't argue. We played the last few minutes. The speed. My calls. Vance's voice, countermanding, on the record in his own words. And the ship driving on into the pier on the movement he ordered. The investigator asked Vance one question. He asked him whose voice, on the bridge audio, had countermanded the officer's order for slow astern. Vance didn't have an answer because it was his own voice on the tape. The helmsman, hearing the recorder back him up, said out loud that the officer had called it right and the pilot overrode her. And I watched it land on Vance in front of the master and the investigator. The moment he understood that the ship had been recording the whole time, and the recorder doesn't feel the tide and doesn't care who holds the con. They cleared me completely. My certificate was never really in danger once the VDR was read out. The recorder had me calling for the ship to be slowed and my orders overridden. I went back to sea, with the back pay, and a finding on the record that the officer of the watch acted correctly and the allision was caused by the conning pilot's excess speed and countermanded orders. The company tightened the rules that matter, the master pilot exchange, and the bridge team's authority to challenge and be heard, all of it reinforced. The helmsman never took a mark, and he's still sailing. I made sure his name stayed clean. And Vance faced an action on his own license and answered for the approach he'd tried to hang on me, the same ticket-pulling board he'd reached to feed me into. I still stand my watches. Still take the hard arrivals. Still call the ship exactly the way she needs to be called. Still say slow astern the instant she needs it, no matter who's got the con beside me. And sometimes on a night approach, the harbor lights sliding by and the ship coming in slow and sure, I think about how the whole time they were calling me the officer who wrecked a ship, the thing that was going to save me was recording quietly in a steel case on that bridge, keeping every order and every voice. I built 18 years on careful seamanship. It turned out the recorder had been keeping that watch right alongside me the whole time.